religious papers this week. Joining me in the studio is the Secretary of Hull and East Riding Interfaith to look through the coverage from this week. Dr. Jackie Lukes joins me in the studio. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Hi.
And you gave me... We're trying to decide on your job title. It's many and varied. You said I could call you Secretary, Coordinator. Is there any other ones we can include in that?
No, that will do well.
we'll stick to that. It's nice.
Secretary, but I don't mind the word coordinator if you want to say that.
It's very highfalutin, as one of my colleagues has been using that expression of late.
Well, then just say secretary.
So, Jackie, you've been taking a look through this week's religious papers. There are quite a number of serious stories, and one that's certainly in the news this morning, as it has been for a couple of weeks now. The floods in Pakistan.
Yes, that's the biggest story, and people in Hull and East Riding will be sympathetic because of the floods we had in 2007. I'm wondering why the response hasn't been as great as to the Haiti earthquake earlier this year, and obviously tsunami before that. And I'm wondering if it's because of the lack of television pictures, because roads and bridges are down, because the decline of print media means newspapers, there aren't the correspondents out there, and so we don't have those pictures, do we, on TV? But the religious press has emails from various missionaries out on the spot. The Baptist Times has a missionary's very vivid report saying that an area to quote, an area the size of England has been inundated. Millions of people have yet to receive any aid. And he describes how everything is underwater. And then the Catholic Herald also has Father McCulloch's hospital that he's worked in for 30 years there, was completely swept away by the River Indus, and he describes this in really vivid detail. So these emails from people on the spot are actually filling a gap. But anyway, apart from the Hull comparison, the main thing is how to give money, and all the charities are raising money, but the general coordinated one, use that word, is the Disasters Emergency Committee, DEC. And that brings together all the different charities, and that's the one that the Muslim Weekly says give money to. And the Hull and East Riding Interfaith website had already put the details, how to give money if you want to DEC, Disasters Emergency Committee. Am I allowed to say our website?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's Hull and East Riding Interfaith, HERI, so it's HERI, HERI.org.uk. Straight away, as soon as you click it on, you'll see this, how the phone number and the address and everything. But the vivid details are really, you have to use your imagination because we haven't got the pictures, or everything submerged, and no roads and bridges, and just everything underwater. And it's still raining. It's still carrying on there.
So that's certainly one story that has dominated the press in the last couple of weeks, and as you say, incredible stories, if not the pictures, certainly incredibly terrifying stories to come out of that.
Well, there are two extra little bits just to add to that from this religious press, which I didn't know about. One is from the Church Times, says that Somalia has banned the agencies which are bringing aid there, although it's terrifically needed. And three in particular, World Vision and Diaspora and then ADRA, they're three Christian-based aid agencies. They've all now been banned for proselytizing at the same time as giving aid. And this is like that Dr. Karen Wu story, and the detail is in the Church Times, and it says that the three charities say, well, we're not proselytizing, we happen to be Christian, but we're giving aid to these terribly poor, starving people in Somalia. But the Somalian authorities feel that the two are they can't make the distinction between, religious body. They say, in a sense, why isn't it like Oxfam or something, which is without religion? So that's an interesting extra story.
Yeah. Let's move on and talk about a subject that will be close to your heart in the fact that you're from New York. You were born in New York and raised for the first 16 years of your life in New York, and a story that I certainly last week remember reading out on the news bulletins last Saturday morning, which clearly will have a divided opinion in the United States, at Ground Zero.
Yes, the story that we all know about really is that there's a proposal to build an Islamic cultural centre quite near Ground Zero, where the Trade Center was destroyed in the September 11, 2001 episode, and there's a sort of English reaction of saying, well, we can understand people being upset. Let's compromise. Let's not have it. There should be a cultural centre. That's freedom of religion in the United States and in the West. But don't put it on their doorstep. Move it uptown. Don't have it next to Ground Zero. And an article arguing this is in the Church Times by Paul Vallely. This is typical of that view. And he says, move it up, a few blocks away. Don't have it so near. But all the other religious press is really firm and says, in principle, if it's right, it should go ahead. And really, it's not going to be people who are making fuss about it aren't going to say, oh, well, I'll have it on my doorstep. And the Baptist Times has a really excellent report and editorial saying that this Islamic Cultural Centre that's proposed, it's called I'm quoting, the Cordoba Initiative, named to reflect the period in the history of Spain when Muslims created an enlightened, pluralistic and tolerant society, and everyone was harmonious. All the Christians, Jews and Muslims were harmonious in medieval Spain, and that's the whole aim of this cultural centre, and it quotes all that, wants it to go ahead, and says that the Baptists in the United States do. And then same with the Catholic Herald. Cardinal O'Malley of Boston is very strongly saying it's anti-Muslim not to want it to go ahead, and you've got to make a distinction, he argues in his statement, between the religion, we're not against Muslims in the religion, and acts that could be done. And obviously wrong acts, or bombings and terrorism can be done by Christians, Jews, anybody, but it doesn't make you against all Christians or against all Jews. You've got to make it that distinction between what they're doing, which some people are doing wrong, and then the religion. And he points out, and so does the Church of England newspaper, that the outcry against this is anti-Muslim, and it's political. It's not just and Wilders, is going over there from the Netherlands. It's not just about the location. And so you've got to stand firm and say, we're not anti-Muslim, and this Cordoba initiative is a good thing. And people in New York and the mayor of New York are not against it. So it's being puffed up, to be a political issue, really. So that's all. Absolutely, and it is having been to New York, it's incredibly fascinating. One very quick, funny quote that you've got for us before we pause for thought, because we've got to squeeze the pause for thought in. You've got a jokey quote to end on. Yes, there's this film, The Infidel, made by David Baddiel. Yes, yeah. In which Omid Bahili, he plays a Muslim man who discovered he was adopted and that he was really Jewish, and it's sort of comic. I haven't seen the film, but the news is that it's come out on DVD, and so there's an interview here in the Jewish Telegraph with David Baddiel, and here's the quote. He says, "A clash of cultures underpins the storyline of The Infidel. It's hardly surprising, for despite his Jewish upbringing, David Baddiel has often been mistaken for being Pakistani." And to quote him, he says, "When I was a kid, I got beaten up, once for being Jewish and once for being Pakistani." Incredible. Says the comedian writer. Incredible. Yeah. And having seen him many years presenting fantasy football, I'd never really thought of him being considered Pakistani. Jackie, good to see you. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for joining me in the studio this morning. The next time you'll be here, Blair Jacobs will be back. That is Dr. Jackie Lukes, the coordinator and secretary of Hull and East Riding Interfaith. Now time to pause for thought. This week with Tim Stephenson, the secretary of the Hull and East Riding Humanist Group.
This summer has seen the appearance of giant fiberglass toad sculptures in Hull city centre to commemorate the death of the poet Philip Larkin 25 years ago. If there was ever an atheist I might be tempted to describe as spiritual, perhaps it would be Larkin. Poems such as Church-Going express a kind of sadness and loss he felt as an atheist visiting an old church, which he once heard was proper to grow wise in, if only so that so many dead lie around. At the same time, Poems such as High Windows spoke of the freedom of the young to break free from the shackles of religion. No God anymore, or sweating in the dark about hell and that, or having to hide what you think of the priest. Obeyed spoke of the necessity of facing the reality of death without that vast moth-eaten musical brocade created to pretend that we never die. Today is the anniversary of the death of another famous non-believer who once worked in the University of Hull and was known to write poetry, though he was better known as a writer and presenter of the BBC TV series The Ascent of Man in the 1970s. Jacob Bronowski died on the 22nd of August 1973, and local humanists have begun a campaign to celebrate his life and work, not with sculptures, but with a commemorative plaque at one of the places he lived during his time in Hull in the 1940s. I would contrast Larkin's gloomy fear about death with Bronowski's exuberant humanism and his Promethean spirit. Bronowski once said, "It is vain to say human beings ought to be satisfied with tranquility. They must have action, and they will make it if they cannot find it. And knowledge is an unending adventure at the edge of uncertainty. Every animal leaves traces of what it was. Man alone leaves traces of what he created."
Tim Stephenson pausing for thought this morning. Now here's a challenge for you.